I never believed in Bigfoot. To me, it was just another urban legend, campfire stories to scare tourists. But everything changed in September 2024 when I forgot my trail camera in the forest. What it recorded that day made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a wildlife photographer. I spend more time in the mountains than in civilization, documenting bears, elk, wolves, anything that moves in the forests of Northern California. I work alone. I prefer it that way. Less noise, more chances of capturing something special. Before we continue, if you like stories about mysteries and unknown creatures, leave your like down below and subscribe to the channel. September 2024 had been productive. I was camping in the Trinity Alps Mountains, a remote, dense region, the kind of place where you can walk for days without seeing another person. I had 5 trail cameras scattered at different points, configured to capture movement, deer, predators, any nocturnal activity. On September 17th, Tuesday, I was collecting the cameras to check the recordings. I got 4 of them without problems, but the 5th one, which I had placed near a stream about 3 kilometers from my camp, I simply forgot. I was tired, the sun was already low, and I decided I'd get it the next day. The problem is that I really forgot, completely. 3 days passed. When I finally remembered the camera, on Friday morning, I felt a tightness in my chest. That equipment was expensive, and 3 days of rain had passed. If someone had found it, or if an animal had damaged it, I was screwed. I rushed out of camp as soon as the sun rose. The trail to the stream was steep, full of loose rocks and exposed roots. It took me almost an hour to get there. When I saw the camera still attached to the tree, loose but intact, I breathed a sigh of relief. I grabbed the memory card and headed back to camp. I turned on my laptop and started reviewing the files. The first hours were normal: deer drinking water at dawn, a raccoon investigating the stream banks at night. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, on the 18th, the camera recorded something. The image started recording movement. At first, I thought it was a bear. The silhouette was large, dark, moving through the trees on the other side of the stream. But the more I watched, the stranger it became. The creature was far away, maybe about 50 meters from the camera. The resolution wasn't perfect, but I could see enough details to know that wasn't a bear. The shape was bipedal. It walked on 2 legs, with an upright posture, almost human, but it was too big to be a person. Way too big. I paused the video, zoomed in. The quality became grainy, but the silhouette remained clear. Long arms swinging as it walked, broad shoulders, a head that seemed to merge directly with the torso, without much visible neck. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. I felt my heart race. I rewound the video, watched it again and again. Always the same thing, a massive figure walking calmly through the forest, occasionally stopping as if listening to something, then continuing. The recording lasted only 43 seconds before the creature disappeared among the denser trees. But it was enough to completely change my perspective. I spent the rest of that day analyzing the video. I compared it with bear footage I had recorded before. It wasn't a bear. The way of walking was completely different. Bears on 2 legs are clumsy. They sway side to side. This creature moved with fluidity, purpose. I considered the possibility of it being a person in strange clothes, but it didn't make sense. That area was extremely remote. No official trail passed through there, and the scale was wrong. Even considering the distance, that thing was huge, easily over 2 meters, maybe 2.5 meters. Bigfoot. The word appeared in my mind, and I immediately pushed it away. Impossible. I was a scientist, a professional. I didn't believe in cryptozoology and mythical creatures, but the more I analyzed that video, the fewer rational explanations I found. That night, sitting in my tent, I made a decision. I had to go back there. I had to see it with my own eyes. If there really was something unknown in that forest, I needed to document it properly. On Saturday morning, September 21st, I grabbed my professional camera, binoculars, and equipment to camp for several days. I planned to stay near the stream, hidden, silent, waiting. I set up a discreet camp about 100 meters from the location where the camera had captured the creature. I chose an elevated point, partially hidden by rocks and dense vegetation, with a good view of the stream and surrounding area. The first day was frustrating. Nothing but the normal sounds of the forest: birds, squirrels, wind in the trees. By nightfall, I began to doubt myself. Maybe that video was just a strange angle of some common animal. Maybe my imagination had created something that didn't exist, but I stayed. On Sunday, I woke up before dawn. The forest was shrouded in fog, dense and silent. I made coffee on my portable stove, quiet, attentive to any unusual sound. It was around 7 in the morning when I heard it. A deep, resonant sound coming from somewhere to the north. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't an elk. It was something I'd never heard before, a deep vocalization, almost like a low lament that reverberated through the trees. I grabbed my binoculars and my camera immediately. My heart was racing. I stayed absolutely still, watching, waiting. Minutes passed. The sound didn't repeat. But then, through the fog, I saw movement. First, just a shadow, undefined, moving through the trees about 70 meters away. Then the fog opened up a bit, and I saw it. It was him, or her, I don't know. The creature was massive, easily 2 meters and 40 centimeters tall, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black in the filtered morning light. It walked on 2 legs with an upright posture, but slightly leaning forward. The arms were long, swinging slightly as it walked. I raised my camera with trembling hands. I managed to focus through the fog. Through the lens, I saw more details. The face was hard to distinguish at a distance, but it seemed to have features that resembled a primate, but not exactly. The head was large, the body extremely muscular. I recorded for maybe 20 seconds before the creature stopped. It turned its head in my direction, as if it had sensed something. My blood ran cold. I stayed absolutely still, not even breathing. For a long moment, the creature stood still, looking in my direction. I don't know if it saw me. The distance and fog probably hid me, but I felt an intelligence in that gaze, even though I couldn't see the eyes clearly. Then, without hurry, the creature turned and continued walking, disappearing into the dense forest to the north. I stayed frozen for several minutes after it disappeared, processing what I had just seen. My scientific mind struggled to categorize, explain, but there was no explanation that made sense beyond the obvious. I had seen a Bigfoot, a creature that shouldn't exist, but existed. I checked the footage on my camera. The quality wasn't perfect, the fog obscured many details, but it was clearly a bipedal creature, massive, covered in fur. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a person, it was something different. I spent the rest of that day at my observation point, but the creature didn't return. At night, lying in my tent, I heard distant sounds, branches breaking, that deep vocalization again, farther away this time. Knowing I was sharing that forest with something unknown was both terrifying and exciting. On Monday, I decided to explore the area where I had seen the creature disappear. I walked carefully, alert to any sign, and I found it. Footprints. Enormous humanoid footprints impressed in the soft mud near a small tributary of the stream. I measured with my measuring tape, 43 centimeters long, 6 toes clearly visible, although the 6th was smaller, almost vestigial. The depth of the impression suggested something very heavy. I photographed everything. I made molds with plaster that I always carried to document animal tracks. These weren't bear prints. They weren't human footprints. They were something intermediate, but uniquely distinct. I followed the trail for almost a kilometer. The footprints led deeper into the forest, to areas where the vegetation was so dense that sunlight barely penetrated. Eventually, I lost the trail in a field of rocks where there was no soil to show impressions. I stayed camped for 3 more days. I had 2 more distant sightings. One on Tuesday at dusk, just a massive silhouette crossing a clearing more than 100 meters away. Another on Wednesday morning early, when I saw the creature drinking water from the stream, but so far away that even with my telephoto lens, I only got a blurry image. Each sighting confirmed the first. This was real. Something lived in that forest. Something large, intelligent enough to remain hidden, but real. On Thursday, September 26th, I decided to return to civilization. My supplies were running out, and I had enough material to at least start documenting what I had found. The trip back was surreal. Each step took me back to the normal world, where Bigfoot was a myth, a joke. But I knew what I had seen. I had evidence, footage, photographs, footprint molds. When I arrived at the nearest town, Weaverville, I went straight to a diner. Sitting there eating a hamburger and fries, surrounded by normal people living normal lives, I felt like I was in two different worlds. I spent the following week in my apartment analyzing all the material. I enlarged the footage frame by frame. I studied the footprints. I compared with all available data on alleged Bigfoot footprints I found online. There were impressive similarities with other reports, but also differences. The footprints I found had that vestigial sixth toe that I hadn't seen in other reports. The vocalization I recorded was slightly different from the sounds attributed to Bigfoot in other recordings. This made me think, what if it wasn't just one species? What if there were regional variations, different populations adapted to different environments? I started researching seriously. I read every academic article I could find about cryptids, unknown primates, hypotheses about how a large species could remain hidden. Most scientists dismissed the possibility completely, but a few, admitted that in remote and densely forested regions, theoretically something could exist without being confirmed. I found reports from forest rangers who mentioned strange encounters, stories from Native American tribes that spoke of these creatures as part of their traditions for centuries, reports of footprints found in remote areas that never received satisfactory explanation. The more I researched, the more I realized I wasn't alone. There was an entire community of people who had seen similar things, but who kept silent for fear of ridicule. I read about a retired forest ranger in Oregon who claimed to have seen an entire family of these creatures in 1987. He never officially reported it, because he feared losing his credibility. I found the account of a couple of campers who heard vocalizations identical to those I recorded, but who were told by authorities that they were just elk. The amount of anecdotal evidence was overwhelming, but anecdotal evidence isn't science. I needed more. In early October, I made another decision. I wasn't going to publish anything yet. I wasn't going to show my videos to the world. I wasn't going to seek validation from cryptozoologists or sensationalist media. First, I needed more evidence, irrefutable evidence. I returned to the Trinity Alps Mountains on October 15th. This time, I planned to stay for a whole month. I brought better equipment, high-definition cameras, professional sound recorders, even a thermal camera borrowed from a friend who worked in search and rescue. I set up a more permanent camp, hidden, comfortable enough for long stays. I installed 6 trail cameras at strategic points around the area where I had seen the creature. I set up audio recorders that would run continuously, capturing any unusual sound. The first days were silent. Then on the night of October 19th, one of the trail cameras captured something extraordinary. The footage showed the creature, clearly visible under the infrared light of the camera, just 10 meters away. It was examining the area around a fallen log, turning over rocks, apparently looking for insects or small animals. For the first time, I could see facial details. The face was notably primate-like, but with unique features. Pronounced forehead, wide and flattened nose, thin lips. The eyes were small, deep-set, reflecting the infrared light with a greenish glow. The creature spent almost 10 minutes at that location, completely oblivious to the camera. It ate something it found under the rocks, moving with precision and surprising delicacy for something so large. I saw it had hands with opposable fingers, capable of manipulating small objects carefully. At one point, the creature stopped and looked directly at the camera. For 3 full seconds, it made direct eye contact with the lens. Then it simply continued what it was doing, as if the camera posed no threat. That was revealing. The creature knew the camera was there, but didn't care, or perhaps understood that it was just an observation device, not a direct threat. When I watched that footage the next day, I felt a mixture of triumph and responsibility. This was real evidence. Evidence that could change everything, but it also raised ethical questions. If I revealed this, what would happen. Hunters would come, scientists would come. That creature, which clearly just wanted to live in peace, would be hunted, captured, studied. I spent sleepless nights thinking about it. Sitting in my tent, listening to the nocturnal sounds of the forest, I pondered the responsibility I had. It was bigger than me. It wasn't just about proving that Bigfoot exists. It was about protecting a species that had managed to remain hidden, free, wild. On October 22nd, something changed. I was making coffee in the morning when I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, approaching my camp. I froze. The creature had never approached my camp so closely before. It always kept its distance. I grabbed my camera, slowly, without making sudden movements. The creature emerged from the tree line about 20 meters away. It was early morning. The light still dim, but enough to see clearly. It was enormous, more impressive up close than any footage could capture. We stood like that, looking at each other. I barely breathed. The creature observed me with eyes that were unequivocally intelligent. It wasn't the empty gaze of an animal. It was the gaze of someone evaluating, thinking, deciding. Slowly, very slowly, I lowered my camera. I don't know why I did it. Instinct, maybe. A gesture of respect, of non-aggression. The creature tilted its head slightly as if understanding. Then it did something that left me speechless. It raised a hand, open, palm facing me. It wasn't a threat. It was an almost human gesture of acknowledgement. I raised my hand in response, mirroring the gesture. We stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds. Then the creature lowered its hand, turned, and disappeared into the forest as silently as it had appeared. My legs almost gave out. I sat on the ground, trembling. That wasn't a casual encounter. It was intentional. The creature had come to see me, deliberately had made contact. Why? Curiosity, threat assessment, or something more? I spent the rest of that day in shock. That moment completely changed how I saw these creatures. They weren't just large animals avoiding humans. They were beings with intention, with curiosity, with capacity for communication, even if basic. In the following days, I had more encounters. None as close as that first one, but all significant. On October 24th, I found gifts left near my camp. There's no other word to describe it. Stones deliberately stacked, branches arranged in patterns that clearly weren't natural. I started leaving food, fruits, nuts. Nothing processed, just things the creature could find naturally in the forest. The food always disappeared during the night. On October 25th, I had my closest encounter yet. I was collecting water from the stream in the early morning when I heard a branch break behind me. I turned slowly. He was there. The creature, at just 15 meters away, partially hidden behind a large tree, watching me. This time, I didn't feel fear, just a strange calm. We stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds that seemed like eternities. Me completely still, water still dripping from my canteen, him watching, evaluating. I didn't feel threat, just mutual curiosity. Two intelligent beings of different species sharing a moment of recognition. Then a bird suddenly took flight from a nearby tree, startled by something. The noise broke the moment. The creature retreated, silently, blending into the forest so quickly that for a second I doubted it was really there. But it was. That encounter, those eyes watching me with clear intelligence, were more real than anything I had ever experienced. I began to notice patterns. The creature was more active during twilight, dawn, and dusk. It avoided midday light. It had specific routes it traveled, territories it clearly considered its own. I discovered it wasn't alone. On October 28th, one of my cameras captured two creatures together. One was the one I had been observing. I recognized it by its gait and size. The other was smaller, perhaps a juvenile or female. They communicated with each other through low sounds, almost like guttural grunts. They moved in a coordinated way, clearly working together to turn over large rocks looking for food. This changed everything again. It wasn't just a solitary creature, it was a population, a society, however small. I stayed in the mountains until November 10th. During that time, I had 12 more direct sightings. I captured hundreds of hours of trail camera footage. I recorded vocalizations in different contexts, calls that seemed like warning signals, sounds that seemed like casual communication, even something that sounded like contentment. I found more footprints, hair samples caught on tree bark. even what appeared to be a temporary resting place, a depression in the ground lined with leaves and moss, large enough to accommodate something the size of the creature. I documented feeding patterns. They ate an impressive variety: insects, roots, wild fruits, small mammals. I found remains of a deer they had clearly killed and partially consumed. Each piece of evidence accumulated, but also each encounter made me question what to do with this knowledge. On November 5th, something happened that solidified my decision about what to do with my discoveries. I was observing from a distance when I saw the larger creature, the one that had greeted me with its raised hand, interacting with the smaller one. They were near the stream. The larger creature was clearly teaching the smaller one how to turn over specific rocks to find crayfish. It was teaching behavior, transmission of knowledge, culture. This wasn't just an unknown species of primate. It was a society with learning, traditions, complex communication. And in that moment, observing that scene through my lens, I made my final decision. I couldn't reveal this, not in the way the world would expect. Because what would the world do? Scientists wanting to study, governments wanting to control, hunters wanting trophies, tourists wanting photos. That family, that small population surviving in the remote mountains, would be destroyed. But I also couldn't simply forget what I had discovered. I had a responsibility to ensure protection, even if silent. When I finally returned home in mid-November, I had a plan. I spent the following weeks organizing everything meticulously. I catalogued each footage, each photograph, each audio recording. I wrote detailed reports on behavior, territories, feeding patterns, but I didn't publish anything. Instead, I created an encrypted file with everything, complete, irrefutable evidence. I left copies with 3 trusted people, lawyers with specific instructions. If something happened to me, or if the population of these creatures was threatened, the evidence would be released. Not for sensationalism, but to force legal protection. I also started working discreetly with conservationists. I didn't reveal what I knew, but I started advocating for expanded protection of that specific region of the Trinity Alps. I pushed for protected wilderness area designation, development restrictions, tourism limitations. I used my reputation as a wildlife photographer to argue for the ecological importance of the region, mentioning the diversity of wildlife I documented, leaving out the most important detail. In December, I got enough support that a proposal was presented to the Forest Service, a significant expansion of protections for that area, including hunting prohibition and severe limitations on human access. It wasn't easy. There was opposition from hunting groups, logging companies, recreational access advocates. But I persisted. I used every connection I had, every favor anyone owed me. In February 2025, the proposal was approved. More than 20,000 acres of additional forest designated as protected wilderness area. Access strictly controlled, hunting prohibited, development prohibited. That family of creatures now had legal protection, even though no one knew the real reason I fought so hard for it. I continued visiting the mountains regularly through winter and spring, always discreet, always careful. I kept cameras installed, monitoring the population. I discovered there were at least 5 individuals, 2 adults, 2 juveniles, and 1 that seemed adolescent, an extended family, surviving together. I saw moments of tenderness among them, the adult female caring for the young with remarkable gentleness, the young ones playing, yes playing, chasing each other around trees, rolling down moss-covered slopes. I saw moments of grief too. In March, I found signs that one of the juveniles had died. I don't know the cause, disease perhaps or accident, but I saw the family gathered around a specific location, making low, melancholic sounds. Clearly mourning. They buried the body, covered it with rocks and branches in a deliberate pattern. They returned to the location several times in the following weeks, as if paying respect. Funeral behavior, another indicator of complex consciousness, of understanding mortality. In April, I witnessed something that filled me with hope. The female, gave birth. I saw the newborn for the first time on April 15th, tiny compared to the adults, clinging to the mother's fur as she moved through the forest. The entire family changed their behavior. They moved more slowly, rested more frequently. The other members helped, bringing food to the mother, protecting when she nursed. That baby represented future, continuation, survival, and I made a silent oath there, watching that small family. As long as I lived, I would do everything in my power to protect them, even if no one knew why, even if I never received credit or recognition, because some things are bigger than personal recognition. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be important. May and June passed. The protected area was working. Fewer hikers ventured so deep. The restrictions kept most people on designated trails far from the family's territory. But not everything was peaceful. In July, I had a scare. I was checking one of my cameras when I heard voices. 2 hikers, young, clearly disobeying the restrictions, had ventured outside the boundaries. They were dangerously close to where I knew the family often rested during the day. If they continued in that direction, they would find obvious signs, footprints, maybe even see one of the creatures. I intercepted them. I pretended to be a forest ranger checking permits. I warned about dangerous bears in the area, completely made up, and directed them back to the main trail. They complained, but obeyed. When they moved far enough away, I breathed a sigh of relief. But that made me realize, no matter how much legal protection I got, there would always be risk. People disobeying rules, poachers, future development, if political priorities changed. My protection was temporary, fragile. I started thinking more long-term. I created an anonymous donation fund destined for conservation of that specific region. I didn't have much money, but I started contributing regularly. I hoped that over decades it would grow enough to make a real difference. I also started documenting everything in a book, not for publication now, but for the future. A complete record of everything I observed, learned, discovered about these creatures. Maybe in 50 years when I wasn't here anymore, when the situation was different, someone could use that knowledge responsibly. Or maybe not. Maybe the book would remain sealed forever. And honestly, I was at peace with both possibilities. August brought a moment I'll never forget. I was sitting near the stream at twilight, just observing the forest. I wasn't photographing, I wasn't documenting, just being present. The adult creature, the one that had raised its hand to me months ago, emerged from the forest. It approached closer than ever before. It stopped at maybe 5 meters away. We looked at each other, and then the creature did something extraordinary. It sat down, simply sat down on the ground, mirroring my posture. We stayed like that for almost 20 minutes. 2 beings of different species, sharing silence, sharing space. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't tense, it was peaceful. When the darkness finally became too dense, the creature stood up. It looked at me one last time, then disappeared into the night. I knew in that moment that I had made the right choice. Not to reveal, not to exploit, just to protect and respect. September marked 1 year since I forgot my camera in the forest. 1 year since my life completely changed. I sat in the same location where it all began, thinking about everything that had happened, the discoveries, the encounters, the decisions. My career as a wildlife photographer continued, but now it had deeper purpose. Every project I accepted, every region I documented, I did with heightened awareness that there were still mysteries in the world. There were still things we didn't understand, that we didn't control, and maybe it was better that way. I looked at the forest around me, dense, ancient, full of secrets. Somewhere in there, a family of creatures that the world didn't know existed lived their lives, hunting, resting, teaching their young, mourning their losses, celebrating new births. Living, and as long as I had anything to say about it, they would continue living that way. Free, protected, unknown. Because in the end, it wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about preserving something precious, something rare, mystery, wilderness, the unknown. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old, and I filmed a Bigfoot in the forest by accident. I camped at the location and finally saw him, and that experience forever changed how I see the world, nature, and our place in it. I learned that not every discovery needs to be shared, not every truth needs to be shouted. Sometimes the noblest act is to protect a secret, not reveal it. I still visit the mountains regularly. Sometimes I see signs of them, Fresh footprints after the rain, branches arranged in impossible ways, that deep, distant sound echoing through the valleys. And sometimes, when I'm sitting quietly at dawn, I feel like I'm being watched. I look at the trees, and for a brief moment I see a massive shadow, a shape that shouldn't exist but does, a reminder that our world still holds mysteries, that not everything has been discovered, catalogued, explained, that in the deep forests, far from cities and roads, nature still keeps its secrets, and maybe some secrets deserve to remain that way, protected, respected, untouched. Some things are bigger than us. Some truths don't need external validation to be real, and I witnessed something extraordinary, something I'll carry with me until my last day, proof that there's still magic in the world, there's still mystery, there are still things beyond our understanding and control, and that, perhaps, is the greatest discovery of all.